Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the economics of soil health management systems on 5 cotton farms in Arkansas. My name is Bill Robertson. I'm the retired cotton specialist with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture and currently work with my wife, Carrie, on our livestock and forage farm. We raise large and small ruminants, exhibition poultry, um, and livestock guardian dogs, among other things. And along with that, I'm a technical specialist with the Soil Health Institute. If you hadn't heard of the Soil Health Institute, it's a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization with a mission to safeguard and enhance the vitality and productivity of soils through scientific research and investment. Today, we're really excited to host the fifth of several webinars detailing the economics of soil health systems across the U.S. Cotton Belt. This webinar is an outcome of the U.S. Regenerative Cotton Fund led by the Soil Health Institute with the mission of empowering cotton growers and their trusted advisors with tools, information, and networks they need to successfully adopt regenerative soil health systems. In today's webinar, we're fortunate to hear from SHI's soil health educator, Emily Ball, and agriculture economist, Dr. Archie Flanders. But before we begin the presentation, I'd like to hand things over to Greg Bohrer. He's the Natural Capital Director at the Walmart Foundation, and he'll share a few words about Walmart Foundation's support for the U.S. Regenerative Cotton Fund and its commitment to the U.S. cotton farmers. Greg?
Thanks, Bill, and thank you for having me here. I'm just going to offer a couple minutes here, and then you can get back to the real experts in the space from the Soil Health Institute. I work, as Bill said, I work at Walmart and the Walmart Foundation, focusing on regenerative agriculture, specifically focusing on U.S. farmers and ranchers who are adopting regenerative agriculture systems, particularly soil health systems. And that includes a commitment to U.S. cotton. So not only have we supported the Soil Health Institute and the work of these webinars and other things at the Institute for some years, we also have a strong business commitment to U.S. cotton and to the sustainability of the cotton that ends up in our supply chains and on our shelves to our customers. And sustainability for us, it's resiliency. It is not something separate from our business mission of helping our customers save money and live better. It is actually core to that business mission of helping farmers make sure that they're conserving the natural resources that their production relies on, helping them become more efficient with their inputs, and building soil health systems that make them more resilient in the face of uncertain market conditions, uncertain weather conditions, and other things that could affect your production. So put another way, soil health saves money and helps everybody live better, and that's what we're about at Walmart Foundation. Arkansas is our backyard. We're up here in Northwest Arkansas. I'm actually at the new Walmart home office here in Bentonville today. Found a little quiet corner to talk to you from. And with the commitment to U.S. farmers and U.S. cotton, we've committed to source 100% more sustainable cotton for our private brand apparel and soft textile products by 2025. And that's through a variety of different cotton certification and verification, some that you may be familiar with, like Better Cotton or U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol. That is actually part of a bigger strategy and a bigger commitment to help protect, restore, or more sustainably manage 50 million acres of land and 1 million square miles of ocean by 2030. A lot of that is going to be dependent on U.S. farmers, row crop farmers who are producing corn, soy, rice, wheat, and cotton, and also the ranchers in the Great Plains and elsewhere who are producing beef to go into our supply chains. We couldn't make that commitment without a partnership with those farmers, and we're proud to be a sponsor and funder of the Soil Health Institute's Regenerative Cotton Fund to make that happen in cotton. So again, I'm not the main show here. I'm here as a listener and a learner along with you. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bill, who's the real expert in this space and will lead us through.
Thanks, Greg. During today's presentation, Emily Ball will be highlighting findings from a partial budget analysis, which will provide Arkansas cotton farmers with the economic information they need to make decisions on the adoption of soil health management systems. Lastly, a few items about today's event. The presentation is being recorded and will be shared with each of you after the webinar, along with the accompanying fact sheet. If you have questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can upvote questions that you'd like prioritized, and Archie and Emily and myself help address them live at the conclusion of the presentation. With that, I'm going to hand things over to Emily to dig into today's content. Emily.
Hi, Bill. Thank you for the kind introduction. Like Bill said, I'll be speaking today about the economics of soil health management systems on 5 cotton farms in Arkansas. So before we get into today's message, I want to take a minute to thank some of my colleagues, one of them being Dr. Archie Flanders, our agricultural economist. Like Bill said, he'll be joining us on the call a little later, but as well as Jessica Kelton, who's my counterpart on the U.S. Regenerative Cotton Fund. She really helped identify farmers and conduct the interviews, so we were able to do this analysis. And like Bill mentioned, the fact sheet for today's talk will be emailed out to all participants as well as available on the SHI website. And just for your information, fact sheets have already been published on the Texas High Plains, Georgia, and North Carolina. So please look out for those as well. So we have known for a long time that soil health practices like reducing tillage and implementing cover crops can provide significant environmental benefits. But when we talk to farmers, they as business people really want to understand the business case and how do these practices impact their bottom line. And so the goal of this work is to present that and provide farmers with the information they need when deciding whether to adopt soil health management systems. And so to do this, we interview farmers who have experience implementing these systems on their farm and have found a way to make them work. So a little bit about the approach. I want to be very clear, this is not a random sample of all farmers in Arkansas. We interview cotton farmers specifically who have at least 5 years experience using what we call soil health management systems. And so in the case of Arkansas, they had a lot more experience. So one interviewed farmer who used exclusively no-till has been doing so for 7 years, and the remaining 4 farmers have been using a reduced till system for an average of 14 years. And as far as cover crops, they have almost as much experience. They have an average of 9 years with cover cropping. So I just want to be clear that this is a representation of growers who have found a way to make these systems work on their farm. They have a lot of experience, and this is not always the case right off the bat for new adopters. However, some of these benefits can be seen early into transitioning, which I'll highlight in the analysis. So based on the production information that they provide during the interview, we calculate what's called a partial budget. And the idea of that is to compare benefits and costs before and after soil health management system adoption. And so there's some more details on that protocol on our website. But just a little example of what an interview would look like. So we would ask a grower, after corn is harvested, going into a cotton crop, what are your field operations? And then we would compare. We would say, what would you be doing if you weren't using a soil health management system, or what are your neighbors doing? And so if there are operations like an herbicide application that they would have done if they weren't using soil health management system and that they do now, it would not be counted in the analysis. So it's important to note that we aren't looking for receipts. We aren't asking about their profits. We're only recording differences between management systems in this type of analysis. Another thing to note is that we calculate revenue using a standardized set of long-term averages. We know things like input costs and commodity prices definitely fluctuate, so we use long-term averages to complete our analysis. And then the other thing is USDA payments are not included in this analysis. We know they're an important tool in helping growers to adopt. They're an important tool in helping growers to adopt, but they don't last forever. And some growers don't use those payments. So we really wanted the merit of these practices to stand alone. So they are not included in the numbers you'll see today. So looking at Arkansas, you can see where the growers are located that we interviewed based on the white dots. So we tried to get a good representation of where cotton is grown in the state. And a little bit about Arkansas, average annual rainfall ranged between 50 to 60 inches, and the average annual temperature was between 61 and 64 degrees Fahrenheit. And the soil types for these growers range dramatically as well, ranging anywhere from a sand or a sandy loam to a clay or a clay loam based on where they are in the state. And the size of these farms, these were all sizable commercial operations for the state, average total crop acres was just under 7,500 with 3,005 acres in cotton, 2,198 acres in soybean, 1,090 acres in corn, 382 acres in peanuts, and 200 acres in wheat, which were double cropped with soybeans. And looking at the practices, one farmer interviewed that one of the 5 farmers interviewed was completely no-till, and that represented 19% of the acres. And the remaining 4 implemented some type of reduced tillage system, including strip till and any reshaping of the beds used for furrow irrigation. That all fell under our definition of reduced tillage. And 15% of our acres were under intensive till, and that was associated with rice and peanut production. So looking at how they compare to the state of Arkansas and the rest of the U.S., no-till represent 19% of the acres, whereas the state of Arkansas is 17%, and the rest of the U.S. is 38% of acres. And for reduced tillage, the rest of Arkansas have 45% of planted acres under reduced till and 35% for the rest of the U.S. And even the 15% of acres under intensive tillage are significantly less than the state average as well as the rest of the U.S. And 72% of the acres from the growers we interviewed were under cover crops as well, which is significantly higher than and U.S. acres as well. So this is really the bulk of our presentation, so I want to spend a couple minutes explaining this slide. All the numbers in this table represent averages for the 5 farmers we interviewed and are in dollars per acre. And like I mentioned, the partial budget results are changes in net farm income that result from specific changes. So in this case, implementing a soil health management system. So we're looking at our expense category on the left. The reduced expenses or benefits are in the center in green. And on the right-hand side are any costs or additional expenses in red. And so we can have a cost and a benefit in the same category, and that is actually the case for our first expense, which is seed. So already this is a little bit of an anomaly. The reduced expense you see here in the seed category is because one of the farmers we interviewed actually decreased his cotton seeding rate. So that's not always the case with implementing the soil health management system, but that's something that he felt he was able to do because of the practices he implements. So therefore, by decreasing his seeding rate, he decreased his seed cost, number of seeds per acre, and that is documented here as $12.90 reduced expense. And then the additional expense you see here is going to be attributed to cover crops. Cover crops can range in complexity, what people decide to plant, where you are in the country. The cover crop seed price can differ. But of the farmers we interviewed, they planted anywhere between a mix of black oat and radish, which was $13.50 an acre, to a 5-species mix, which was $49 an acre. And so the cover crop seed cost average across the 5 growers was $21.80 per acre. Looking at the next category, fertilizer and amendments, there was a reduction in fertilizer expenses of $14.59. And this was attributed to the adoption of the soil health management system, like all of these numbers you see here. So 2 of the growers were able to cut back on synthetic fertilizer as a result of their management system, which is really a huge benefit when you think about how expensive these inputs are. And they really make up a large proportion of expenses on operations, on most operations. And then no farmers in this case had any increased expenses in these or additional expenses in this category due to using a soil health management system. As far as pesticides, there was a $36 reduction in expenses. And part of this was attributed to being able to cut back on herbicides and the weed suppression benefits of cover crops. In addition to being able to cut back on herbicides, growers also were able to, some of the growers were also able to eliminate insecticide applications, citing more beneficial insect populations because of their cover crops and their management practices, as well as being able to reduce fungicide applications because of better disease resistance in their system. And so it's important to note that sometimes you would see an additional expense in this category. This has been the case in other states where we've done this analysis, and that would be due to terminating the cover crop. So the growers we interviewed, they saw that herbicide application if they chose to terminate the cover crop with an herbicide. They saw that herbicide application as something they would have done already, or they terminated using a roller crimper. So just note that that's a source of additional expense in other analyses we've done, but not in the case of this state. So we also saw reduced expenses associated with fuel and labor, and that's in line with what you'd expect if you were doing fewer field operations or less tillage. This results to about $28 reduction in expenses. And it's worth mentioning, this is one of those benefits you would see right additional tillage passes, essentially that fuel in your tractor, right? So that's something you would, a benefit of this you would see pretty early on if you were transitioning to a soil health management system. And the additional expenses we see here are attributed to planting and then roller crimping any cover crops. So that's the source of the additional expenses. There were no differences in post-harvest expenses between a soil health management system and those that are conventional or business as usual, so to speak. And then equipment ownership. Like I mentioned, in these systems, hopefully we're taking fewer tillage passes across the field, and with less trips across the field, that's less hours on tractors and implements, that's less wear and tear and depreciation and maintenance. So this represents those saved costs, about $31.06. And the additional expenses you see here are associated with the field operations I talked about before. So that's getting out to plant the cover crop, roller crimping, if that's how they choose to terminate. And that still represents about $23.62 reduction in expenses for equipment ownership. So in all, the difference in expenses was that our reduced expenses outweighed any increased expenses by just under $85. And so this is not taking into account any change in yield that growers might have seen. This is just due to reduced inputs, reduced production costs compared in a soil health management system compared to business as usual. So here's where, if growers were seeing an increase in yield, that's where we would see a source of additional revenue. However, although growers may have seen an increase in yield, none of the growers we interviewed confidently said it's because I'm using a soil health management system. So other growers we've spoken to have had mixed results, saying that they can attribute to a soil health management system, but the growers we interviewed couldn't confidently say that was the case. But it's important to note that no one reported a decrease in yield, just maybe not an increase. And looking at it all together, any between changes in expenses and any additional revenue that we did not see, we did see a positive change in net farm income. So the growers in our analysis saw an increase of about $84.66 per acre averaged across the 5 growers. So this is why it's important that in our education, we really highlight the importance of focusing on farm profitability rather than just yield when we're implementing these practices, kind of as a metric of success, right? Because these growers aren't necessarily seeing an increase in yield they can cite because of the soil health management system, but it's clear that they're saving money in other ways that they might not be considering. And looking at this, breaking it out by farm, although the change in net farm income was really variable, ranging from $10 to $255 an acre, everybody did see an increase in income. And so this variability is due to a number of factors, including how much they're spending on cover crop seed. We saw that can really vary. And if they've decided to cut back their fertilizers and pesticides. So the farm with the greatest net farm income increase of $255 an acre had the greatest decrease in production expenses. So this was the farm where they were able to decrease their seeding rate. They felt comfortable cutting back their fertilizers, as well as their pesticides, and because of the benefits of cover crops and reducing their tillage. And the farm you see with $10 increase in net farm income was the most recent adopter of soil health management system. So it's possible that he hasn't seen the full benefit of implementing these practices on his farm, but a benefit nonetheless. And yeah, it's important to note that all the growers interviewed did see an increase ranging from $10 to $255 an acre. So looking at some other benefits, in addition to increase in profitability, growers are seeing more than those benefits by adopting soil health management systems, and even more than you see recorded here. The growers we interviewed, we asked about increased crop resilience, increased field access, improved water quality, improved public perception of agriculture, and increased soil organic matter. 2 of the growers confidently said that they've seen their soil organic matter increase by 1%, and the other grower said 1.5%. So that's important when you think about the benefits that increased organic matter can provide as well. In addition to these benefits, we also heard growers mention improved infiltration, water retention, which is important when they're doing a lot of irrigating, improved nutrient cycling, and overall biodiversity on their farm. So just some takeaways from today's presentation. Although no growers cited an increased cotton yield, they also did not cite a decreased cotton yield. And soil health management systems increased net farm income for these 5 farmers on an average of $85 an acre for cotton. So in this interview, we also asked about other crops, and they did see an increase in income for other crops like corn, soybean, and rice due to the reasons we talked about. So please check out the fact sheet for a little bit of information on that. The 5 farmers averaged about 7,443 acres using no-till on 19% of those acres, reduced tillage on 66%, and cover crops on 72% of the acres. And like we mentioned, farmers report additional benefits such as increased resilience to extreme weather and improved access to their fields, which are also very important. And looking at current adoption rates for the state of Arkansas, no-till and reduced tillage, about 62% of acres, and cover crops on 11% of acres, stands to reason that more Arkansas cotton farmers could improve their profitability by adopting a soil health management system. And we will be continuing this work. We're continuing this work through the U.S. Regenerative Cotton Fund, so thank you to all those supporters. And I believe Alabama is coming next, so stay tuned for that. And once again, I want to thank all the supporters of the U.S. Regenerative Cotton Fund for allowing us to do this work, with special thanks to Ralph Lauren Corporate Foundation. As a nonprofit, we really depend on the generosity of these organizations to help us do this work for farmers. And with that, I'd like to say thank you to everybody on the SHI team that's helped conduct these interviews, conduct the analysis, and also thank you to the farmers that gave us some of their time and their information so that we can do this good work. And I hope this information helps growers and their advisors, with the information they need to adopt a system for them. All right. So at this time, I'd like to welcome back Dr. Archie Flanders and Dr. Bill Robertson for the Q&A. All right, thanks.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, I'm excited to have you guys help me answer some of the questions today. I'm going to take a look at what ones we have coming through. I guess I'll direct this one for Bill. So I mentioned that that all of these growers have experience adopting these systems. So what does this look like for a new grower? You've had the great experience of being able to help people sort of jump into these systems. What do you think is a good place to start? What are some stumbling blocks you see? What does that look like?
Well, I don't know, in the fact sheet, it didn't say who the farmers were, but I have a pretty good idea who they were. And I've worked with a lot of those, so I kind of know some background on some of those. But for a new farmer getting into cover crops, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of hurdles. And one is that we're trained into doing the things that we've always done, the way we've always done, and it's something new, and it's not easy. As a farmer, you're going to have to struggle with some of the new things. With your helpers, you're going to have to help encourage them to try to go along with you on trying some of the new things. But, on farmers that are looking to get into cover crops, always want to try to start off simple. If we get a plan that's too complicated, and the probability for failure is high. And we don't want it to be like my dad used to say, I made 2 years out of that, my first and last. We want them to try it and then evolve into it. So a single species cover crop like cereal rye is, to me, and a lot of people, you see online and look, that cereal rye is the cover crop of training wheels. It's easy to establish if you have a little bit of soil moisture, and you can sling it out with an airplane or a fertilizer buggy or whatever, especially in front of a rain that's coming, then you'll get a wonderful stand. And it's easy to terminate. Like wheat, a lot of people want to use wheat. Wheat doesn't have near the root structure that cereal rye does. and it's hard. It's hard to terminate sometimes. Cereal rye, you just show it a jug of Roundup and it's gone. But anyway, the cereal rye is a great place to start, and always try to start with, around 40 to 50 pounds of seed per acre when I fly it out. If you're going to drill it, you can cut that rate in half. But a lot of times, when we're getting into cover crops and all that, a lot of times we don't have the drill. We don't have the manpower on the farm, because that's during harvest on some of our other crops and while we're trying to pick cotton. And we got the KISS method. We got to do it simple, and we're trying it on hopefully on limited acres. Um, and always my best success on flying cover crop seed out is prior to first leaf drop on my defoliation, and fly that out. And the the only time I've had failures doing that is when the soil is completely bone dry. And I put seed out and I get a quarter of an inch of rain. That's enough rain for the seed to germinate and try to get established, but not enough soil moisture for the plant to get in a root system established. But if I have a little bit of soil moisture, and then especially if I can fly it out in front of rain, then get perfect stand. And then if you go on a straight cereal rye cover crop, I think it's very important to terminate that early. And my kind of rule of thumb for Arkansas is terminate a straight cover crop of or straight stand of cereal rye in a cover crop when the panicles just start emerging from the boot. When they start emerging from the boot, I feel like I have a 5 to 7 day window to terminate the cereal rye with Roundup. And for Arkansas and a lot of places in the Mid-South, usually that's about that first full week in April. And so that'll give us, 3, 4, sometimes more weeks than that in front of a planter. But the point is there, we have enough residue to give us protection from the wind, give us ground cover to help reduce erosion. We have enough root growth in there to help improve soil structure, but we don't have so much dry matter above the soil surface. We have a hay rake when we go out there with a planter. We can basically go out with the planting equipment we have and work into that, and then kind of get your feet wet with cereal rye, and then you can let your program evolve, get on a few more acres, take advantage of some cost share programs with NRCS, and get into some multi-species things that'll work for you. But straight cereal rye, I made this little question a long answer. But anyway, a straight cereal rye cover crop, I think, is the best place to start, learn it, and grow from there.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question for you. So, in this analysis, growers did not report an increased yield due to soil health management system. In your experience with growers in Arkansas, is this usually the case, or have growers cited that they were able to get a yield increase?
Well, you know, there's a yes but answer on this. Okay, the thing that I like when I implement soil health management systems, my main objective is not really to increase yield, it's to reduce production costs. In fact, I know some of the farmers that have been doing a lot of implementing soil health management systems. Uh, they tell me, said, Bill, I'm not trying to win the yield contest. I want to win the profit contest. And that's some of the things that y'all showed here, especially with some of the growers that were able to do more than just plant a cover crop. But when I've worked with farmers and we've changed nothing else but adding a cereal rye cover crop, and it's been a very, very dry year, I've seen a 10 to 15% yield increase because we get better water infiltration. We're able to harvest more of the free water that's out there. And then a lot of times we can, as Archie's data that you presented, Emily, showed that a lot of times we can reduce irrigation, we can reduce an insecticide application. And so in those years we didn't change any fertility or anything else. In a dry year, I expect to see a yield increase. But in a wet year, cotton's an annual, it's a tree. It does not know it's going to die. And so I feel like a lot of times we we double or triple our effective rooting zone. So we're putting cotton roots down deeper and have access to nutrients that we haven't been accessing before. And in a wet year, that is like putting out a fire with gasoline on cotton. We have a plant at the end of the year that's really green. It's still wanting to run and play when it's time at the end of the year for it to be winding down. And I've seen either no yield increase or I have lost yield in before in a situation like that. And that's where one of the growers that you interviewed where they cut their population back and reduce fertility. That's what we have to do when we improve soil health and we have opportunity for a plant to make a deeper root system and to mine the soil deeper than what we have been doing for our water and nutrients. Then we can cut back on population, because when we cut back on population, the thicker we have the cotton plants, the more energy that it uses to try to outgrow the other plants. So if we thin the population, the plant doesn't have to spend all of its extra energy on growing a taller plant. It can spend some of its extra energy on growing more roots. So we have soil that's healthier, that has the better potential for a plant to build a better root system. And then we encourage that cotton plant to build a bigger root system by planting it thinner. That, to me, those are the two steps for cotton to be toward a regenerative program. So we reduce population, we reduce fertility. Then we get into a situation where we can have same yields or even a higher yield, even in a wet year. But you have to do more than just plant a cover crop to reduce cost and to keep your yields the same or even better, even in a wet year. So it's just, if it was just as simple as planting a cover crop, everybody would plant cover crop, wouldn't they?
Lots of trial and error. I understand that from talking to you and other growers. I guess it's kind of in that same vein. So they were asking about the growers we interviewed, but I think you can speak to more growers than that. But so how long did it take between the transition to conservation practices to realize the economic benefits? So that's something we didn't necessarily ask specifically of our interviewed growers, but something you can probably speak to, Bill.
Okay, I worked with, there were a handful of growers across the state that, they said, Bill, you can have this field. And we would split the field in half. And I would encourage them to keep doing what they're doing on one side. And we would go to the other side and start with just a simple cover crop, and we could modify some practices. The main thing is to introduce them to practices to improve soil health without them having to spend more money or extra money on equipment. So we wanted to have programs that they could use their planters, farm the way they farm, and so forth. And so there were some of those that I started on a dry year, and with a 10 to 15% yield increase, they were doing nothing else. We saw economic benefit right away. Now, there are some other things that, economics is important, but when I plant a cover crop, I want to feed the soil microbes. I want to improve soil health. So there are some other things that we looked at, and I was at a meeting one time, and the speaker there, and I think he's with the Soil Health Institute now. He said most every farmer that he's worked with, regardless of their level of education, had a PhD in observation. And so I would encourage producers to do some of the things like that, to look to see what's going on. Like even in that first year, when we get a big rain, I'd encourage them to go down to the bottom end of the fields and look at the water running off after a big rain. And if there was, times on their conventional till side, the water would be muddy. There'd be a ton of water running down the rows. There'd be water standing in the middles. On the cover crop side, if it wasn't a terribly big rain, even while they had runoff on the conventional till, on the other side, the water all soaked in like a sponge. And then if we get a huge big rain, there was water running off, the water was clear. And so that's a clear indication of improved soil health, because your soil particles are sticking together, they're holding together. You got improved water infiltration. So that measure of soil health didn't cost you anything other than the gasoline and your time to drive down to the end of the field. And so there's some different things, but we would see that right away. And, I worked there were a lot because I had to learn these things. I had to learn cover crops and I had to do this on my own. But the work I did with the National Cotton Council, working with the supply chain and field to market and with their field print calculator, reducing tillage and implementing a cover crop were the two quickest ways to shrink our environmental footprint to be more sustainable. So those are areas that really piqued my interest. So I was determined to learn how to do it. And I worked with farmers that had an interest in it. And so we could do those things to improve soil health. But I went into some fields and was visiting with farmers, some of the farmers that were in the survey, and I would ask them questions and that BS fight, I think, I'd ask them questions and they'd give me an answer. I said, there's no way it could be that simple. Like going into a field with a hard pan. Okay, I feel like I'm going to have to do something with that hard pan to break a hard pan before I put a cover crop. They said no. I said, you're crazy. But I planted a cover crop in the hard pan. The cover crop took care of the hard pan. And I spent less money on the cover crop seed than I would have diesel running deep tillage. And so why did that go on? It's because of the roots of the cover crop. So even after that first year, I figured it would probably take 2 or 3 years before I saw a really big increase in earthworms. I was so surprised after one uh, off season, go through the winter, go through fall and winter and go into spring to planting time. I'd go out there with a shovel. I carried a shovel around with me more than anything else. I'd dig because we can see above the ground. We can't see below the ground. So as an agronomist, I kind of really shifted my focus to looking at just what happened above the soil surface to really trying to pay more of attention to what's going on below the soil surface. And I was so surprised that I would go out there and those fields we split in half at how deep the cereal rye roots were and how many earthworms there were. And I go to the other side of the field where we didn't do the cover crop, and I'd have to dig before I'd come with an earthworm. They're there, but when they don't have anything to eat, there's not going to be very many of them. But we feed them, and they're there. And so there are a lot of things like that we see. But some of the big increases in water infiltration, all that, well, we got a couple of years under our belt, especially going into the third year. We were rocking and rolling. And that's when really things are really going to hit. But even after that first year, there are some observational things and some, depending on the year, there are some things that kick in right away.
Awesome. Thank you. Lots of interest in cover crops today. So this question, many growers here in California are interested in roller crimping, but find it challenging or ineffective. The interviewed farmers, but I'm sure you can talk to other farmers who have had success with that. How does it look for them? How do they get a successful termination and avoid any competition with the cotton crop?
Yeah. Well, I was very fortunate. Perkins Sales and Service in Bernie, Missouri had a 6-row roller crimper that, everybody was 12 rows and nobody wanted a 6-row roller crimper. So that worked perfect for me because my research plots were, how wide's our picker? 6 rows. And so my plots would be 6 rows wide, the length of the field. And so they basically let me use that. They didn't give it to me, but they let me use it. I think it's, even though I'm retired now, I think it's still at the headquarters where I kept my equipment. But we tried that. And on cereal rye on the grains, it has to be past anthesis for that roller crimper to really work good. Now, a flat roller on the cereal rye and all that would roll it down, but it basically would not terminate it. But if I used the roller crimper and the cereal rye was past anthesis, I did a really great job on that. But if my stand was a little on the thin side, it didn't work so well. I need to have a really good, thicker, but even if I planted, say, 40 pounds, 30 pounds, but I had a good uniform stand in tall biomass, that roller crimper worked really well. Now, I worked with one of the growers on there that he had a very dense, a very thick cover crop. And we experimented. He used a roller basket off of a DMI rig, which basically just a roller with rods going across to roll his cover crop down. So, and that was 6 rows wide. And I did the roller crimper. Now, to look at it, they looked about the same. the roller crimper smashed the cover crop down into the soil really good and really compacted it on the soil surface. The roller or the roller crimper rolled it down, but it left it a little fluffy. And I was very surprised that we planted and we got almost a perfect stand where we run the roller crimper. But where we run the straight roller, we got a real erratic stand. Where the cover crop was a little thin, we got a good stand. But where it was really thick, we got a poor stand. It was an acceptable stand, but it was skippy and it was kind of poor. And I equated to that like, you know, if you've ever sawed like a one before, and I use the tailgate of the pickup for a sawhorse a lot of times. But if you're sawing at one before, say a foot or 2 foot away from the tailgate of the pickup, that board bounces, and it's hard to cut that because you get a lot of bounce. And I equate that to how the cover crop took some of the energy away from the down pressure on the planter to plant through a cover crop that was sometimes fluffy and sometimes not. That the planter had a hard time having uniform depth placement. But when you hold that one before down and you saw right next to the tailgate of the pickup where you're holding the two before down, that two before doesn't shake, and your saw will cut through that one before like hot knife through butter. And so because there was no bouncing, and so I feel like that planter where that roller crimper smashed it down and held it down to the soil, it was like cutting that one before with no bounce. That we had very uniform depth and placement. And so after that point in time, I really felt like it was worth your expense to purchase a roller crimper as compared to a roller. But if your cereal rye is just at post boot or just barely fully, the head is fully extended, it's not very mature, then a lot of times I've gone out there before on planting in front of a roller crimper and all that, and in a week's time it's standing back up. But so it depends on the maturity of your cover crop, and the roller crimper helps that. But for a roller crimper to give you good effective termination of like a cereal rye cover crop, I feel like it has to be almost at post anthesis for that to work, and then it works good. But too early, it's just especially the roller, you're going to roll it down and it's going to stand right back up. So I've been disappointed myself with just using a flat roller or even a roller crimper on a grass cover crop that wasn't mature. And that's what I've seen.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. I think we have time for one last question. This one's going to go to Archie. So could you tell us a little bit about some of the work SHI is doing as far as transition period? So what do adopting soil health management systems look like in kind of that 0 to 5 years? Are you looking at that?
We're considering transition, but we don't really have data to give a year to when certain things happen, but we can line up and tell which happens first. For example, if you reduce tillage and reduce erosion, well, anything related to reducing erosion will occur. You'll get better water infiltration. And then later on, after you plant cover crops, it's likely you could get some nutrient cycling, and you may be able to reduce your fertilizer expenses. And then with cover crops, many times even in the first year when you plant cover crops, you could get some weed suppression. You'll be able to cut back on herbicides. And then later on, after more years, the soil organic matter potentially increases, and then you could likely realize some increased yields. But the way we do the analysis, we do before and after, so we don't have any intermediate years to define when things occur. But we can be certain that all of it doesn't happen right away. Remember that we're increasing soil health, and this is something that's going to be a gradual and incremental increase. So as your soil health increases, the benefits of reduced expenses will occur with that.
Great, thank you. That was really helpful.
Yeah, Emily, it's not as simple as flipping a light switch on, is it, Archie? It's not that simple. It takes time.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on. It looks like we covered most of our questions. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to me via email, and I can answer them myself or direct them towards Bill or Archie. But in a few days, all the attendees will receive a follow-up email with the link, and then with the link to the webinar as well as a brief survey. So we'd appreciate that. You could fill that out. But thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.